Good evening and welcome to Resource PNG. On tonight's edition, we find out what's happening in PNG's petroleum industry with the likes of Esso Highlands and Oil Search Limited. In this first segment, we talk to Peter Graham, the Managing Director of Esso Highlands, and discuss the production phase of the PNG LNG project this year. With the construction phase over and a portion of the workforce reduced, we hear how Esso Highlands has assisted demobilised employees.
I have with me Peter Graham, the Managing Director of Esso Highlands. Welcome to Resource PNG again.
Thank you, it's my pleasure to be here.
Peter, when's the first shipment of LNG scheduled for?
The first shipment scheduled in the second half of next year, so second half of 2014. We'll have the first cargo leave the LNG plant. So
Great. How confident are you that that's going to happen?
I think we're very confident it will happen in the second quarter. There's clearly quite a bit of work to complete between now and then. The commissioning and startup activities associated with bringing all of the plant online and getting ourselves ready to operate the plant safely and reliably. It does take some time to make sure all of that work's done so that we end up with a reliable start of operations. All of the equipment's performing as it should, but perhaps more importantly that no one gets hurt in that process. So.
Right. Now, post-construction, you've had to demobilise a lot of your workers. How many have been demobilised?
At our peak, we had about 21,000 workers working on the project, of which about 9,000 were Papua New Guinean. So, I mean, that, for starters, was very pleasing from our perspective to have such a large contingent of Papua New Guineans being trained. As the various components of the project come to completion, we'll phase those numbers down. And there's probably been several thousand workers at this point in time who've finished up with the project, and more next year as we close out various construction activities.
Okay. So, are there plans for outplacement of them?
The project's done a lot of work to try and smooth through that transition. Personal viability training for all of the Papua New Guinean workers, so that they get some help in learning how to market the skills they've got and how to go about finding another job. I mean, it's quite simply, how to prepare an application for employment, and a lot of training, associated with getting ready for that transition. So it's not dropped on people suddenly that they're suddenly out of work. We're also working with the government to try and get some infrastructure projects underway. So as people finish up with us, rather than have those skills not get used for some time, that they transition from our construction work onto government-funded infrastructure programs. And we hope to demonstrate 2 pilot programs, one in the Highlands and one at the LNG plant site early next year. So.
Okay. Does your enterprise centre have a role in that?
Not directly in that, but they've been very, very engaged in trying to help local businesses get started. And I mean, they will employ people longer term. Some of those small and medium enterprises. And I'm sure if employees who finish up with the project were to go to the Enterprise Centre, then I think they've in fact got a register that people can register for employment through the Enterprise Centre. It's been a great success from our perspective, that particular resource centre.
More of this interview after the break. Welcome back. Commissioning of gas from the Kutubu fields began in mid-2013. We asked Peter Graham how that's been going.
Peter, I believe there was commissioning of gas in the offshore and onshore pipeline in August this year from the Kutubu fields. What's your focus now as you go into commissioning?
You're correct. I mean, commissioning gas was introduced from the Kutubu fields around mid-year this year. Basically, the pipeline is filled from Kutubu down to the LNG plant site. So that gas from Kutubu is used to progressively commission the components of the LNG plant. So over time, all of those components get, if you like, tested and then ready to be put online to produce LNG. We've started with some of the utilities, things like power generation. So if you go and visit the plant today at night, you'll see the plant's completely lit up. It's powered by the turbines that are already running on the site. And then progressively over the next period of time until we actually start up production, various subsystems will be brought online using that commissioning gas.
Okay. So Peter, to the Hydes gas conditioning plant,
Right.
what's the production capacity for that per day?
It's about 1 billion cubic feet a day of gas, so it's quite a substantial volume of gas. And that plant too is coming along construction-wise very rapidly. I think people are aware that the Como airfield, the large airstrip up in the Highlands, was completed earlier this year, and that was critical to allow the major components, the big pieces, to be shifted from Port Moresby up to the Hydes gas conditioning plant to construct it. So all of those pieces were safely transported to Como and then by road from Como to Hydes. They're now all in place. So now the Hydes gas conditioning plant project management team and contractors are busily completing all of the work in and around those various components to connect them all up. So again, great progress up there as well.
Sounds like it. Sounds like great progress. What's ExxonMobil's view on the EITI?
We're great supporters of EITI, and ExxonMobil has been a long-term supporter of EITI internationally. From our perspective, the timing is perfect as the revenues start to flow from the PNG LNG project starting next year. The importance of transparency and good governance around those revenue flows just becomes that much more important. And I think the fact that the PNG government is willing to make an application to become a member of EITI will just serve to enhance the reputation of Papua New Guinea as a place to invest. So it's a really important initiative, I think, for the government, but also for industry in PNG, the extractive industries. So,
thank you for your time today, Peter Graham.
My pleasure.
Peter Graham, Managing Director of Esso Highlands.
Resource PNG continues when we return. You're watching Resource PNG. In this segment, we talk to the Managing Director for Oil Search, Peter Botten, and learn how the company has taken on more tax credit projects outside of its normal operations.
It's a pleasure to have Peter Botten, the Managing Director of Oil Search, with me. Welcome to the show again, Peter.
Good to be here.
Peter, in its first half-year results, Oil Search announced strong figures in terms of production and profits. Is the company still on target to meet its projections?
It's been a good year for us. We've had continuing strong oil production. We've had very good safety statistics, and we'll deliver what we think to be a strong profit at the end of the year. Certainly our production will be, we believe, at the top end of the guidance that we've given the market, and that's always good after given the maturity of these oil fields that we're dealing with.
Oil Search has taken on a few major tax credit projects outside of its normal operations. Can you explain a bit about that?
As part of our community responsibilities, we believe we have to help government in delivering a range of infrastructure projects across the country, not just in our project area where we do a lot of tax credit infrastructure work, but now to the national infrastructure priorities, such as the Maria House, where we're applying our project management skills, our safety and overall project delivery abilities to deliver for the government using tax credit monies a refurbishment of Maria House, which will become a major office for government operations.
Right.
We'll also be doing the central government office, and we're also doing a refurbishment or rebuild actually of Lloyd Robson Oval on behalf of the government to actually have a world-class rugby league stadium. All of these projects are important projects deemed by the government, and using our skill sets as a company and an operator in Papua New Guinea, we're able to deliver these projects effectively, efficiently and on budget, and help build the capacity of a number of government areas to allow them to do the same in the future. It's part of our overall giving back to the community and making sure as the major PNG company that we're actually doing our community piece.
And right in line with what the government's been talking about with
priorities of delivery of infrastructure, the expectation of infrastructure delivery is a key priority for us as a PNG company, and helping government to deliver those projects is certainly a core objective for our organisation as we move into delivery of PNG LNG and beyond.
Now, Peter, exploration in the Gulf of Papua has produced some promising results. How will these Gulf gas fields be integrated into your existing business?
Well, we've been the only operator out that have drilled wells out in the Gulf for now over 15 years. And most recently we drilled 3 holes out in the Gulf earlier this year using a large semi-submersible drill rig. We had 2 gas discoveries out of 3 holes out there. The volumes, if they were onshore, would be considered to be quite material, but as they're offshore, more difficult to access, they are important reserves, but we will obviously be looking to integrate that with our other gas and other gas in the region, including some of our own gas, Barrakiwa at Yaramu, but also potentially other gas such as Elk Antelope for any future development and any downstream development that the Prime Minister was referring to earlier this week.
Right. Now, also yielding some promising results, your exploration work in the Middle East. Where are you on that and how are you going forward with that?
Well, we've had a very exciting oil discovery in the Middle East, which could be very material to the company. Ironically enough, we used the technical skills that we apply in the highlands of Papua New Guinea and took them over to Kurdistan and found a large structure, drilled that structure, and I'm pleased to say it could contain in excess of 500 million barrels of oil. So that's a substantial oil discovery if it works out that way. So over the next 18 months we'll be spending around $250 million on appraising that discovery and bringing that discovery to production. Clearly our focus will remain in Papua New Guinea, but occasionally the skills that we've developed here can be applied into another country, and certainly we've had good success in Kurdistan using those technologies.
And it's exciting to hear that lessons learnt in PNG are being applied elsewhere.
Absolutely, and the reasons we had that discovery was because we're pretty good at understanding fold belt geology, which is typically seen in the highlands, and applying that skill set into Kurdistan found our Tazza discovery. And our people will be going over from PNG to help our operations there. So it's a great career path for certain people from Papua New Guinea to go and see a completely different operating environment, but with similar types of rocks.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about the exchangeable bond deal or the discussions around it with IPIC?
Well, obviously the PNG government in 2009 decided that it would leverage the oil search shares and borrow money against those oil search shares to allow them to take up their full equity entitlement in PNG LNG. A great decision, I might say. The bond that was issued to allow the government to raise that money matures in March next year, and the government have indicated that they wish to potentially buy back those shares and ensure that they remain as a key holding in the sovereign wealth fund that the government is setting up. We're obviously very supportive of the government to continue to be a shareholder. We have a very strong partnership with government, but it's completely government's decision as to the merits or otherwise of buying those shares back. Now the government right now is in discussions obviously with IPIC and looking at ways of financing that repurchase. And I'm pleased to say that the value of the oil search shares has gone up substantially since that time. And looking forward with the development of PNG LNG and hopefully further expansion, our developments in the Middle East, hopefully the price of and value will go up further. But as I stress, it's completely in government's decision to buy them or not. All we're doing is helping to facilitate a communication process, and then it's up to IPIC and the government to decide whether they do it or not.
So possible positive outcomes on that?
Well, a positive outcome is a nice, stable, well-oriented shareholding base, which, and being the PNG's largest investor, we think it's a very good idea to have the government as a shareholder. But it's up to them to make a financial and commercial call as to whether they want them back.
More when we come back. Thanks for staying with us. Oil Search Limited has been involved with a 35 megawatt biomass power generation plant in the Morobe province, a first for PNG. As we continue our interview with Managing Director Peter Botten, we find out what developments have taken place so far.
Now, more exciting news is that Oil Search is behind the development of a biomass power generational plant in Morobe. That's going to be great benefit to Morobe, isn't it?
Well, we're very, very keen on this project. This is a first for Papua New Guinea. We're trying to develop right now a 35 megawatt power project in Morobe, which would feed electricity into the ley grid and the northern grid across the north of the country. We believe this is a project that has substantial economic merit. It follows up on comments that the Prime Minister made earlier this week around the development of power and downstream business, and the development of sustainable, long-term, competitively priced electricity. Reliable supply of electricity is clearly something that both Moresby and Ley are crying out for. And our discussions with customers of electricity up in Ley indicates that there are substantial expansion activities in businesses in Ley, whether it be the brewing business, the biscuit business, the tinnery, the cannery business. All of those are looking for stable energy supply to expand their business and develop further their markets in Papua New Guinea. As PNG expands, they want to expand, and their biggest hurdle to that expansion is electricity supply. So we think the biomass project, which is a significant power business, which involves over 3,000 of our local communities in the Morobe area, in the Markham Valley, we think that that's a very sustainable, long-term, stable business that can supply power, important power for economic development in that area. And Oil Search is standing behind it as a developer and operator. And although in the future we might involve other Papua New Guinean investment or encourage other Papua New Guinea investment in it. But it's an exciting project for us, and again follows the government's theme of trying to develop downstream business, encourage economic development necessarily outside just the export LNG and or gas and oil business.
It'll be great news for the business community in Morobe, that's for certain. But what sort of a time frame are we looking at before we see some output from that?
Well, at the moment we're in the final stages of negotiations with PNG Power for a power offtake contract. We hope that can be concluded in the very short term. We will then be moving into front-end engineering design next year, and we hope to see power sometime in 2017. We are looking at ways of actually accelerating that with different power sources before that time, but really it's a substantial long-term investment in the business in that area, which we think is very exciting.
What does the biomass project involve?
It involves actually growing lots of trees. And it involves quite a large area of land. It involves a lot of people helping us to grow those trees, and using special type of trees that grow quickly and regenerate quickly. We're able to use the wood that comes from those trees to power a power generation of a plant of some size. We can also downscale that to almost village level, so individual villages could grow trees and have some small scale biomass power. But what we're focusing on is a 35 megawatt plant which is fed by trees. And those trees grow quickly. There's certain types that are extremely good and grow extremely well in Morobe, and we've got a range of test plantations which have gone outstandingly well over the last 2 years.
Peter, you've recently celebrated 10 years of operating the PNG oil fields. Can you tell us about that?
Well, obviously it's been a highlight for Oil Search in its some 80-odd year existence to take over and run the oil fields, all the oil fields in the country. And that's allowed us to develop our national staff, train them, develop their career paths, and actually deliver a great outcome for the country as well as for Oil Search. We've substantially increased the volume of oil that and reserves that the oil fields were originally thought to have held. The original operator, Chevron Texaco, did a fantastic job to build those fields, but they projected that they'd be running out of oil in Gobi, for instance, 2009, 2010, in Kutubu about 2012. With further oil that we've discovered, and of course with the gas business developing, we see another 30 plus years of development in the oil fields, and that gives our staff, our people, a tremendous career opportunity with Oil Search, and delivers the country a great outcome, is that we'll be producing oil 30 years after the original Treasury and operator projections said it was going to finish. So it's been an outstanding success for us, and controlling our future business has led to Oil Search being one of the top 3 performers on the Australian Stock Exchange in terms of returns since we took over operatorship. So it's been a great outcome for our shareholders, great outcome for the country.
Very proud achievement for you. Thank you for your time today, Peter.
Thank you.
Peter Botten, Managing Director of Oil Search.
More of Resource PNG when we come back. You're watching Resource PNG. In this next interview, we feature Paul Chalakos, the Executive General Manager, Operations Oil Search Limited. We discuss drilling the Mananda 7 pilot well, located in the Petroleum Prospecting Licence 219.
I have with me Paul Chalakos, the Executive General Manager for Operations Oil Search. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks, Tanya.
Now, recently at a conference, Paul, there was an announcement regarding a find in the Gulf of Papua. Would you care to just clarify that?
Look, we drilled 3 wells in the Gulf of Papua this year. First offshore wells drilled in PNG for over a decade. It was to test some new exploration models. We successfully encountered hydrocarbons in those wells. We significantly de-risked the prospectivity by proving reservoir had extended that far into the Gulf. That was one of the key risks. Our exploration teams are assessing the findings from those wells now, and we'll plan future work programs accordingly.
Is that a long way in the future, seeing any sort of production from that?
Oh, I think we need to do some more work before we can make a sensible comment on timing for those things. And there would certainly need to be further drilling, but that will be dependent upon the work that the exploration teams are doing now.
It sounds like it may definitely have an impact on your investment in PNG.
It's certainly an opportunity for further drilling there. We see further prospectivity in the Gulf, and clearly we've got an appetite to test those things.
You're also drilling on the Mananda 7 at the moment. What are your forward plans for that?
Mananda 7's the 3rd well that we've drilled on the Mananda structure in the last couple of years. We've had discoveries through the Mananda 5 and 6 wells, and we've submitted a petroleum development licence application earlier this year. Mananda 7 is to test the structure further. We obviously see potential there for a development that could add significant production levels and life to our facilities. One of the beauties of the Mananda development would be that it can tie back into existing facilities that were built as part of Southeast Mananda and deliver gas back into the Agogo processing facility reasonably easily. So we're about to spud Mananda 7 very shortly, and we'll assess the results of that and then plan the forward drilling program on the structure. And obviously the timing for development will be dependent upon progress of the application that we've got with the government.
Right. So early stages yet?
Well, look, I think we're quite positive around what we've found there, which is reflected in the fact that we've submitted the development licence application. but there's still some potential, significant upside potential at Menanda. It's a very, very big structure, and the results of Menanda 7 will be influential in how we drive the future appraisal of that structure. We've established a development team for that project, multidisciplinary, pulling people together from exploration, subsurface drilling and project development and engineering, so that we can optimise the development up there.
Can you outline some of the initiatives that have been used to double your production from your initial output?
Look, it comes down to a range of things. We've done a lot of work with existing wells to optimise zone changes in wells, additional perforations, very active well intervention programs. We've also done a lot of workovers in our wells, so we've had a workover campaign running for the last 2 years, again to improve productivity and ultimate recovery from each well. We've also driven a very, very aggressive drilling program in and around our existing fields, and that's been key. The capacity of our geoscientists to identify opportunities in a very complex structural environment, and then of our drilling teams to drill and target what are, in geological senses, reasonably small size targets. Although they're small size targets, because they're adjacent to existing facilities, they are very, very high value for us. So we've added something like 76 million barrels of 1P recovery or recoverable reserves to our facilities over the last 10 years. That's been driven by that aggressive drilling campaign. So the keys are around identifying those opportunities and then being able to deliver them, and then just optimising the production within the existing wells and facilities.
You touched on something there regarding the terrain. I'm presuming that experience in this region helps a lot with adding to that output.
Yes, it certainly does. It's obviously a very, very challenging environment from a logistical perspective. So we have helicopter supported rigs. We work with very, very diverse communities which have different ways of interacting on occasions. And the experience of our people in being able to deliver projects successfully in that terrain and in those environments is absolutely critical for the success.
Thank you for your time today, Paul.
Thanks, it's been a pleasure.
Paul Chalakis, Executive General Manager of Oil Search Operations.
In recent news following our interview with Mr. Chalakos, Oil Search reported that on January 16, 2014, the Menanda 7 pilot hole well was at a depth of 7,824 feet. Attempts to free the drill string were unsuccessful. However, the pilot hole has been a success in terms of providing more structural information. Groundwork to sidetrack the well is currently underway. Coming up after the break, we talk about the PNG Industry Malaria Initiative. Welcome back to the show. The PNG Industry Malaria Initiative, PIMI, is a new highly innovative PNG industry sector initiative that enlists the country's major resource sector companies to accelerate implementation of the National Malaria Control Strategy, with the further specific goal of achieving PNG malaria elimination by the year 2050. We speak to Steve Knowles, the program's project director.
I've got with me Steve Knowles, the project director of PIMI. Steve, welcome to the show.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to be here.
What does PIMI stand for?
The Papua New Guinea Industry Malaria Initiative.
Now, I understand that up till now you've been doing a lot of work in Africa with malaria control. Perhaps you could tell our viewers a bit about that.
Well, I've always been involved in malaria control programs for private sector companies. It's been a passion of mine to get the private sector to step up to be part of a government's malaria control program, and as part of their corporate social responsibility to aim at malaria control. So I worked for a big mining company in gold mining company in Africa.
Was that Ashanti Gold?
Anglo Gold Ashanti.
Right.
And we implemented malaria, a gold standard program in Ghana, the Obuasi mine, which subsequently attracted a global fund grant for the country of $180 million. But we also replicated that in 8 countries in Africa where the company operated in.
Steve, based on your African experience, what sort of challenges and opportunities do you see in PNG?
I see very great opportunities and challenges. You have a will from the government, as we heard this morning with the Prime Minister. That was absolutely fantastic. There's total buy-in from the National Department of Health for private sector to get involved, and the overwhelming response to the private sector in actually this PME is a task force created by the private sector for the private sector to bridge this malaria gap and have one vision to do malaria control in Papua New Guinea in alignment with the National Malaria Control Program. So there's and malaria, as you know, is endemic in Papua New Guinea, especially in the island areas. And we have this vision of a PNG free, PNG malaria free by 2050, and that's a realistic achievement.
Will you use the same strategies you used in Africa?
Fundamentally, any malaria control program has a set number of options that you can actually choose. There's indoor residual spraying, there's nets, there's community awareness, there's larviciding of standing water to reduce the population of mosquitoes. There's a mass drug administration if necessary. So those interventions are standard, but what we want to do is tailor-make one of those to the risk or the situation in each place. There's no one size fits all. But yes, certainly we will. In Papua New Guinea, you have an added problem, and you have Plasmodium vivax here, which we don't have in Africa. There's only falciparum, and so that's an added problem thrown into the mix, but not insurmountable at all.
So what is important? Why is it important to have malaria control in corporate social responsibility?
It makes good economic sense. That's in a nutshell. That's how we sell it to the. It's a business case. It makes economic sense for a company, a private sector company, to have a malaria control program. Most companies I've spoken to in Papua New Guinea all say the same thing, that the biggest threat to the public health threat to their operations is malaria. It has enormous ramifications in terms of absenteeism, in terms of lost time, in terms of costs of medication for the employees and their dependents. So it makes economic sense for them to do it. And then it has the added benefit, once that win is in there, of the community. It lessens the burden of malaria on the community. School attendance goes up. They have more funds available that they don't have to pay for medication for their children. It has government acknowledgement of what they're doing for the greater community. It really makes sense for a company to do it.
It does, and I believe you have a quote that you often like to.
Thank you. There's a quote from it was in the London Financial Times, firstly, that says that malaria control program is the best example of a sustainable corporate social investment program for a company operating in a malaria endemic area, with a win-win for company and community. And that is it in a nutshell. It has a total win-win for the community and for the company.
Now, what can the industry, how can it work together more closely with the government and donor agencies to deliver these programs?
In all my travels in the malaria world, there's always been this holy grail. And the holy grail to us is that all companies in a specific country bind together to form a common mechanism to channel all their malaria spending in the same vision. And we tried it in Ghana, we tried it in other countries, it has never worked. PNG is a global first in establishing PME. Right. Because that is exactly what PME is going to do. and PME gives them a common direction, a common goal, access to international best practices, reduces the overheads, all the attributes of having a centralized system to do malaria control. Now, I've spoken to a lot of the companies and said to them, you know, knowing that this malaria is a major threat to you, why don't more companies actually have a program? Now we have Newcrest, which is streets ahead in Papua New Guinea. We have Oil Search. A lot of the companies are doing something. Some of them do a lot for the community as well. Some are just in-fence. Some distribute a few nets and say, well, that's I've done my bit. Some say it's the government's job. It's not my job. You know? And so when I spoke to them and asked them, they say, well, firstly, how do we measure the impact? We don't really know. We know it's a threat, but we don't know how big a threat. You know? Others say that we don't have the expertise or to be able to implement a program like that. You know, we don't know what to do. Others say that it's not our core business. Guide us. We need guidance. So they want to do it, but they just don't have the right delivery mechanisms for it. They don't have the right expertise. It's not their core business. So that's where PME wants to step in to assist them and find out. We're not an implementing company. No, we're not an NGO. We're not a donor funding. We're a task force that is going to go out to these the operations in the provinces to assist them in go and guide them in getting a best practice program running in alignment with the National Malaria Control Program. And I'd like to say, yeah, that the National Department of Health are totally supportive of this as well. And also to facilitate private public partnerships between the province and the resource provider that's in the province.
So how specifically is PME going to facilitate delivery programs?
By assisting them, by doing an assessment of their risk and their needs, by assisting them with best practices to formulate a program that would best aim firstly at controlling and then elimination of malaria in their area. Facilitating this PPP with the provincial health authorities, whereby the provincial health authorities will provide rapid test kits and drugs to the community, to the private sector run community clinics. So that'll be their part. So it's really a win-win situation and a symbiotic partnership between the provincial health authorities and the private sector operating in that. And what we're looking at is 4 stages. The first stage, we expect the company to look at control and elimination within their lease area. Then we'll move out, expect them in stage 2 to move out to their impact area, for want of a better word. And then move out into their area of influence and eventually the whole province to link up with other resource providers in that province. And we foresee that the last 2 stages would be funded with donor funding and government funding as well. But we expect the private sector companies to be still involved in supporting this whole operation.
Right. So what current programs or projects have you got?
Okay, currently we are looking at 3 initial projects. Obviously, we're still new on the ground. We want to test our methods, test our resources.
Right.
We have Rimbunan Hijau, or RH as it's known now, with their Pomio estates in East New Britain. It's going to be the first one. At the same time, Simberi Gold Mine out at Simberi Island with St. Barbara Gold. And then the New Britain Palm Oil Limited at their Hoskins estate at West New Britain. That's going to be the first 3 in phase 1. Phase 2, we're looking at once again New Britain Palm Oil with the Ramu Sugar Estate, Oil Search at their Hydes plant, WR Carpenters at their estate in Western Highlands, and then Newcrest Gold in Lihir in New Ireland province. And that's kind of phase 1 and phase 2, which will take us up to 2014, end of 2014, and 2015, 2016, everybody.
I was going to ask you about timelines. These are long-term projects,
yes,
aren't they?
Yeah. Well, the task force set up as an 18-month task force, okay, funded by the industry to start this off, to look at it. Then when it really takes off properly, we should have, within 3 years, we should have everybody, all industry aligned with the whole thing, all industry running their own programs in their areas, looking at moving into the third phase, and with private sector PPPs with the local provincial authorities to go forward. And then what we would then like to do is take a step back and say, right, we'll do a governance for you, we'll kind of audit your programs for you to see that you're on the straight and narrow. Because at that stage, once we have formulated a program for them, they then have a choice to either implement it in-house, in which case we will assist them in the training and finding the right people for them, or outsource it, and we will then assist them in finding an acceptable resource provider, implementation provider that can do it for them.
In terms of monitoring and evaluation, I suppose, will you play an integral role within, say, the Department of Health, for instance, to help them to monitor and evaluate the success of these projects?
Absolutely. We will set up the monitoring and evaluation plans that we will set up for the programs will tie in totally with the National Malaria Control, at least the National Department of Health's reporting program. So we'll have the same documentation as them, and the same will definitely feed into their M&E programs as well. We've been talking to them. It's been absolutely marvelous, the response from them. They totally accept PIMI as almost like a resource provider for them, as a partner to help them to accelerate the national malaria implementation of the National Malaria Control Program, and be a partner with them on that side, but also to partner with them in building up their local capacity and helping them be partners with them. I think we just leave it at that. We really want to be partners with them, and don't see us as a threat. We're not setting up a new program. We're not trying to change anything. We want the private sector to align with the National Malaria Control Program.
Sounds like you've got great support. You've rattled off a list of most of the major resource players. So it does sound like a very hopeful project. What are you hoping to see? What are the outcomes you want to achieve?
The outcomes eventually is a malaria-free Papua New Guinea by 2050. That's our ultimate aim. We have the Solomon Islands, which are just across the water. They're on the cusp of malaria elimination. We should be the same. Papua New Guinea should be the same. We're looking at control/elimination in the outline. What we really want to do is the outline islands, and then moving into the highlands, and eventually into the rest of Papua New Guinea. That's our ultimate. And we've been well supported by a number of big sponsors, each putting in $150,000 over the 18 months. They've been the Chamber of Petroleum and Mining, absolutely fantastic, totally supportive, as you saw today. The Rimbion and Haiju group again, they've been absolutely supportive of that from the agribusiness industry. We tend to think Papua New Guinea, mining, petroleum mining, but the agribusiness is huge here as well.
Yes.
And they totally committed, and they are even more involved with the community. They don't have a specific area of operation. Their estates just morph into the community.
Yes.
So they're really involved with the community. We had St. Barbara through Simberi Gold. They've been a major contributor. And then the Australian government support. They've come up with the money today. They like this partnership business. They like the fact that we align with the national program. We're not doing anything out of sync with the national program. and that the government is totally in supportive of one as well. So they've come up and given, and with the funding as well. And we've had smaller donations from the New Britain Palm Oil, the Bank of South Pacific, and the Oil Search Health Foundation with in-kind donations. So there's been a huge response. And from this morning, my pockets bulging with cards from people saying, "Come and talk to us. Come and talk. We want to be part of this. You know, we want to show." And it's a way of showing the government that the private sector is totally committed to to achieving the betterment for the country.
Absolutely.
You know, we want to be involved in it, and this is a huge way of showing it.
Steve Knowles, I wish this project well, and I know the people of Papua New Guinea will be happy about this program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
No, absolutely. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Steve Knowles, Project Director of PNG Industry Malaria Initiative.
That ends Resource PNG. If you have any comments or queries, do email us on this address, resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. Or to find out more, check MTV online. That's www.mtv.com.pg, and go to our Resource PNG page. Or you can check our page on Facebook. Until the same time next week, bye for now.